Hi, Clifton Henry here. In this video, part 1 of Web Programming 101 Getting Started, I'm going to show you the core of programming. Well, it's probably not what you think. How the internet works from a web programming perspective, what web programming is, regardless of the language, the basic structure of the internet. Every page has these elements. What those elements look like so there's no more confusion. All right, well, let's get started. So what is the core of programming? The core of programming is the ability to find solutions through code. That's it. You see, you come up with solutions to problems by having a conversation with your computer. Let me explain. You see, programming is simply the process of speaking to your computer in a language your computer understands in order to get your computer to perform a specific task, that task being the solution. There's a certain way to speak to your computer, and there are certain languages it understands. For example, would you expect someone who can only understand English to be able to make sense of the phrase, ¿Cómo se dice en francés? Los zapatos? You're more likely to get a response back like, ¿Cómo say what? I don't know a Frances or anything about her toes. What? In this example, we have one person asking a question in Spanish about a word in French to a person who only understands English. How could the person being asked the question ever give the correct answer if they don't understand the language? It's the same way with your computer. It can't respond correctly if it doesn't understand what you're saying. Your computer is multilingual, able to communicate in various languages, and can perform quite well if you talk to it the right way. But you have to speak to it in a language that it understands. When you write code, you send messages to your computer in a familiar language that allows the computer to give an appropriate response. So, how does this process work when talking to a computer on the web? Well, much the same, I would say, but let me explain how the internet works first. You see, the web is a network of networks that have servers that store our applications on them. Now, servers are no more than computers that share their resources as a service through a network. Therefore, the web is considered to be an interconnected network of computers that provide a service. That's why we call it the internet. Okay, here's a less geeky way to explain it. In almost every city of the world, there are streets that connect to other streets that connect to other streets. Okay, well, you get the picture. That's the internet. Now, the vehicle you use to travel the streets is your web browser. On every street, you have sections of land that have buildings on them. Some of those locations provide some form of service to the community, like a library or a grocery store. Now, those are servers. Every one of those locations has a specific look and feel to it. Well, that's your website. How that location functions and performs whatever it is that it does is determined by the policies and procedures that location uses. Well, that's your program or your script. Every location on the streets in that city has an address so that it can be located. Now, that's your domain name. And that's better, right? Okay, well, I know that might seem like a lot right now, but I don't want you to worry because it's really not, and you don't actually have to be an expert in everything I just mentioned. You just need to have a basic understanding of how they all fit together, and that's what you have right here. So far, you should have a better understanding of what programming is, and have a general overview of how the web or the internet works. All we need to do now is put the two together to define web programming. So that means web programming is the process of talking to a computer on a network in a language that it understands in order to get that computer to perform a specific task, that task being the solution. Easy enough, right? But check this out. Sometimes you'll talk to the computer that the user is using to access the web. Well, this is called client-side scripting. Sometimes you'll speak to the computer that the website is on. This is called server-side scripting. Usually, you'll need to know a different language to effectively communicate with each one. Hey, but don't worry. I'll let you know what's important for now, and if you decide to dig deeper later on, then I'll help you on your way. The fact is, you can get pretty far along without having to have mastery over an entire language. But there are some basics you have to know. Number one being HTML. And then number two, you need to know CSS. Just so I'm clear, knowing HTML is not optional. You can't really create great web applications if you don't know how to utilize the basic foundation of all web pages. Learning CSS, some would consider to be optional, but in all honesty, not knowing CSS will just slow you down, especially when you have a client or you have a need of some special look in your new web application that you're creating. Now, since this isn't a course on HTML or CSS, I won't get too deep into those subjects at this time, but I will give you what you need to know along the way. That's fair, right? So let's get into some good old-fashioned web programming. That's why you're watching this anyway, right? Now, it's important to know that before you put in the effort to create any web application, you need to be clear about what purpose your application will serve. Otherwise, you'll just be wasting your own valuable time, and we both know how important that is. For the sake of this introduction to web programming, our purpose in our application will be simply to greet our visitor and then tell them how to contact us. First things first. I'm going to assume you have a computer, or else you probably wouldn't be watching this. Go ahead now and create a folder that you can access easily. For now, you might consider making a folder called Web on your desktop. Second, I'm going to assume you have some program to use to do your programming. Now, if you can't currently afford something like Dreamweaver, you can always use your text editor. If you're using a PC, you can either use Notepad or download a free program called Notepad++. There's a link to it below this video. Now, if you're using a Mac like me, you can use TextEdit or download a free program called Text Wrangler. There's a link to it below this video. Now, the reason I've advised you of the alternate text editors instead of the default text editor that came with your computer is because each of them has highlighting features. And these highlighting features will help you to identify errors in your code, missing tags, or incomplete elements. It helps, especially when starting out, to see the code highlighted on the screen in front of you. Now, if you're serious about this though, go ahead and invest in Dreamweaver, regardless if you're using a PC or a Mac. Okay, so go ahead and open whatever program you chose and let's get started. For this video, I'll use Text Wrangler just so I can show you how to do this in a text editor.